And with more good news, we have the 89th legislative session update. Dr. Rapp.
Thank you, Madam President. I do think a couple of things are important, that Rocky normally includes, and I don't know, Rocky, if you've got this for Q1 or back to Q2, but the last figure we had was we hang on to 3 out of every 4 kids in our footprint. And so I'm continuing to help us, tell that story that we are a destination school district. And when you come here, you have chosen well. So, yes. So with that, the fact that we are on the wrong side of the legislative equation, I think that this is a good segue actually to what we're facing. And I'll point out a couple of things that'll tie into what Rocky shared as well that are important for us specifically. Last week was a busy week, even though we were on spring break. And I know from visits to the Capitol to phone calls with elected officials, there's definitely no spring break when it comes to the legislative session. The 60-day deadline to file a bill did pass. That was March 14th. So there will be an updated count of this for you next time around. But prior to that deadline, there was over 8,300 bills filed, over 1,300 of those related to public education. Just think about the massive amount of information to try to sort through. And of course, not all 1,300 of those will see the light of day. But you can see there 99 bills are related to school finance, and that does make it a challenge because people want to know, well, how might my bill impact you, or how might this bill impact you? And that's really hard to run scenarios, even if those bills aren't going to be scheduled for committee hearings. Of note, bills numbered 1 through 150 in the House are the speaker priority bills, and the Lieutenant Governor has indicated so far that bills numbers 1 through 40 represent those priorities. Okay. So here's some just things about bills that we see that are on the move, and I'm just recapping some things we've been talking about for several months. House Bill 1 and Senate Bill 1 are the appropriations bills. Scott did run the analysis for you all. We had that in our budget presentation last month. The increase to the golden penny yield, if that was to be realized, that's $1.5 million for our school district. If the increase of the safety and security allotment happens the way it was in those bills, that would be another $1.5 million. House Bill 2 is the House's bill where they're increasing the basic allotment by $220. We talked a lot about that last month, but some highlights from that. That would generate $13 million. We talked about that in the budget meeting, but our projected revenue that we would lose because of our enrollment decline is $14.5 million. So we are on the wrong side of that math. We're actually upside down still. $1.5 million, even with a $220 increase the basic allotment. When you look at what Rocky told you for his projection, what Scott shared in our budget at your work session, our forecast for fiscal year 26, we're going to project at 46,402 students. So we're going a little bit underneath Rocky's projection even for our enrollment that we will staff on. Okay, and then that means right now our ADA that we would build the budget on is at 43,154. And so what people still are struggling to connect is that we don't get funded for 46,000 students. We get funded for the ADA, so we're talking about 43,000 students. So the reason that we're projecting to lose $14.5 million is because we're having to project an ADA drop of about 1,400 kids, even though that's not our enrollment drop. And so that's not favorable math when you are in a declining enrollment district. And I would just remind us all, too, over 500 school districts in the state of Texas are declining in enrollment. That is half. So that we have a lot of other people in this boat. So the legislature really does need to take into consideration what to do. When you have this many districts like us that won't benefit from a $220 increase, but due to inflation, your growing districts may not benefit from a $220 increase either because inflation is so much higher than that. So you can see in House Bill 2, the other numbers there, the comp ed allotment would only generate about $560,000. The transportation allotment going up would only generate $56,000. And a special ed CCMR bonus would generate about $52K. There's some intensity-based funding in HB2 for special ed. We don't really have an easy way to run that math on. SB2 is education savings accounts, the Senate's version. HB3 is education savings accounts, the House Bill's version. And Senate Bill 26 is increasing teacher pay, but no increase to the basic allotment. Last week, the Education Savings Accounts Committee hearing was definitely one of the major things that happened at the Capitol. The House Public Ed Committee heard almost 21 hours of testimony on education savings accounts. I don't know if that sets a record, but it was a really long time. It started on Tuesday, and it did not end until the following morning on Wednesday. We'll recall from what we discussed at your March 3rd meeting, the House bill, what they're saying is they would give 85% of the estimated statewide average amount of state and local funding per student for an education savings account. There's quite a few bills scheduled to be heard tomorrow by the House Public Education Committee. You see a variety of those there. I really just want to touch on two of them tonight, House Bill 6 related to school discipline and House Bill 123 related to the early ed allotment. Brian Colbeck and the technology team are watching the bills related to prohibiting student use of personal wireless communication devices. You have one of those on the House side that's being heard and one that's already passed out of the Senate committee and is going to the full Senate. House Bill 6 on discipline, there's a lot of recaps we've all been getting from a variety of associations. Just a couple of things on that. One, it would expand the reasons for which students in grades below third grade can be placed in out-of-school suspension to include conduct that threatens the health and safety of other students. It ultimately would allow a district to place expelled students in a virtual or in-person DAEP, but yet I don't know if there's funding to accompany the creation of the virtual program for DAEP. And then creating an expedited process to allow a district to request a court order to remove a special education or 504 student from their setting if a threat assessment determines the student's presence would likely result in physical harm. I do know that there's a lot of conversation around Chapter 37, which is the discipline code in general. I'm not for sure what will result from this session. We are expecting something to result from this session. We'll keep a strong watch related to discipline. House Bill 123, when we talk about unfunded mandates, we've talked about the unfunded nature of pre-K and the early ed allotment, and that we're only funded for half-day pre-K. This bill would propose to increase the weight from 0.1 to 0.11, which is very minute. And with that amount of funding that we are going to get from that very small change, they want to require us to use that allotment to pay teachers a stipend for completion of reading academies outside of contracted hours in that bill. Now, you all already committed local funds to pay our staff for completion of reading academies, and we're very thankful for that. That was millions of dollars that the state did not provide for that request. I do not see that this bill would be able to come in with the funding that it would be requiring there as well. It also requires the commissioner to establish new reading intervention and math intervention academies and create a new early literacy intervention allotment. Would require a 12-month intervention for K through 3 students. So this is kind of like House Bill 1416. We didn't get funding for that either when students are not successful in the STAR test. And it would require all of our K-8 math teachers, principals, APs, math coaches, and math interventionists, which we really don't have money to have the math coaches and math interventionists, but that's a different point we made earlier, to attend a math academy by 2031. So I'm a little worried about some of the things in this bill, and we'll keep a watch on it as well. There were several Senate bills passed out of committee last Thursday. You can see the variety of those on the screen there. Of note, Senate Bill 568 is their bill related to intensity of services funding for special ed. So you see that model on the House side. You see the Senate bill model for that, but it was left pending in committee. So a lot of those other things passed, but that one is left yet to be determined. Other bills to watch, there is House Bill 124, which would increase the safety allotment a little bit more than what it currently was increased to in the appropriations to $14 per person and $37,000 per campus. And then House Bill 122, and then similar to it, Senate Bill 686, would require school districts to have open enrollment policies across Texas. The fact we see two of those, one in each, is something just to keep a watch on as well. Of course, they say that it would be subject to capacity limits, but that's something to keep our eyes on. Before we left for spring break, we did send a newsletter to all of our elected officials with important updates about the information I provided to all of you about the misleading calculation that it is when you look at average funding per student in Texas with averages. And so I've just included that again here that we shared with them. Of course, we shared the whole slide presentation with them. But it is misleading to take all of these Tier 1 allotments and calculate and say that the average funding in the state of Texas per student is $10,800. Or for us, if you want to average all of these Tier 1 allotments together, you could say we receive $8,559. That is not the case because we can't spend the special ed allotment, the CTE allotment on every single student. We can't spend any of those other Tier 1 allotments on every single student. So your special ed and your CTE, we talked about last Monday, inflate what that average per student looks like. There is not 10,800 student per student funding in the state of Texas. We cannot be saying that that's the case in order to avoid increasing the basic allotment. The basic allotment is the amount that can be spent on every single kid, and to say that it's 10,800 that's raised, that's artificially inflated, if you will, with money that can't be spent on every kid, it's not right, and it's misleading, and it misrepresents what we're working with. We did remind our elected officials of the budget reductions that we have made. To your earlier questions that you asked me, that we have been reducing in administrative cost in our school district. We've been reducing administrative costs in alignment, central office administrative costs in alignment with our enrollment decline. Over 136 FTE positions have been closed down, many of those support positions, while TEA is growing in positions. TEA staffing is at pre-pandemic levels. So your school districts are reducing staffing, reducing support. The agency is adding staffing, which increases burdens on school districts to comply with their request. Our additions in positions have been in special ed, counselors, VLA, and safety and security. We maintain the lowest administrative ratio allowed by the TEA First Financial Rating Indicator on this category. And in fact, many school districts across Texas maintain that lowest rating. We've made numerous reductions as a result of these budgetary challenges, but to y'all's points earlier, without an increase to the basic allotment that would match inflation, which it needs to be $1,340 when you're a declining enrollment district and your recapture goes up, you continue to have less money to operate with. And we consistently will be back talking about what programs do we reduce next, what staffing do we reduce next. And the majority of our staff is out on campuses with kids, where we are fast running out of options to reduce that do not directly hit our classrooms and our programs. And we're doing everything we can to bide time, to give the legislature time to increase that basic allotment. And I appreciate y'all's advocacy. This is a state issue. If you read the news every single day, it is the DFW area, the San Antonio area, the Houston area, the El Paso, the Austin, school districts talking about layoffs, budget cuts, school closures. This is not mismanagement. This is a funding crisis for public schools in Texas. And the legislature has the opportunity to address it.